Welcome into Ducks on the Pod, episode 27, the second of our second season here. Thanks as always for tuning in. Great to have you along. For the notes and links referenced on this week's episode, please visit sportshacks.com. That's hacks with an X. It should be right there on the top of the homepage. If not, just scroll down a bit and you'll find it. You can follow the show on Twitter at Ducks on the Pod, and we're on Facebook too. Pretty pleased with Sugar on Top. Rate and review the show so that we can attract more listeners. Now, hopefully the rain will stay away this weekend, as I'll be at Comerica Park for all three of the Yankees' only visit to Detroit.
The New York Yankees? The New York Yankees!
Needless to say, I'm excited to see all the big-name players.
Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Costanza.
Okay, so maybe not those guys, but Judge, Stanton, Sanchez, Severino, Gregorius, they'll all be there, and I can't wait. Now, speaking of waiting, let's stop waiting and get into what we all came here for. We're going to start in the AL East, where the fun part is, obviously, the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry is back. I would argue that for the first time since 2011, both teams are entering the season with justified claims to the title of Kings of the East. The Sox are the reigning champs, and the Yanks are the heirs apparent. And while this surely means we're going to be bombarded even more by ESPN as they routinely feature these two on Sunday Night Baseball telecasts, it also means we might finally have a heated rivalry in baseball. Now, I promise I wrote this season preview before the benches cleared twice on Wednesday night here. But that just goes to prove my point that these two teams already don't like each other. They're buying into the fact that historically this is a rivalry, and now that the two teams are back on top of the division, it can start to boil up again. We have to say peace to Joe Girardi and John Farrell. One of the more interesting aspects of this division race is going to be watching two first-time managers figuring things out on the fly against each other. Aaron Boone, Alex Cora, they've taken over for Joe Girardi and John Farrell. It was a bit of a surprise that Girardi wasn't brought back, at least at the time. But it felt like Farrell, on the other hand, had already been canned by the time he actually was. It's a pretty clean swap, new school for old school. A new wave of managers has begun to wash over us, and fair or not, Boone and Cora are going to be two of the more prominent faces of that movement as we start to see this shift. The new sheriff in town in the East is Giancarlo Stanton. The biggest splash of the offseason was the Yankees' acquisition of Stanton. They likely would have been the favorites to win the East even without him, but now we're talking about a collection of power bats that some think could hit more home runs than any team ever has. We'll have to wait and see on that. Stanton's going to have to start hitting the ball and not swinging and missing. He's got a ton of strikeouts racked up already. But that'll come with time, and if you're a Yankees fan who's at Yankee Stadium booing Stanton, I really just don't know what to say to you. Maybe you shouldn't come to the games. The wild card is going to be Boston's starting pitching. Chris Sale is going to be a Cy Young candidate again. I'm confident in that, so the Sox will have him to lean on. David Price is poised to return to ace form, or at least something close to it. Early returns on that look promising, I think. Rick Porcello is bound to be better than he was last year. And all things considered, that's a pretty damn good top end of your starting rotation. The bounce backs from Price and Porcello are absolute necessities. If they don't get back to their old ways, the Sox will be scrapping it out with the rest of the AL second-tier teams for a wild card spot, as opposed to giving the Yanks a real race for first. Now, the bottom two spots are crucial as well. Drew Pomeranz and Eduardo Rodriguez have got to get back to full health. Rodriguez did make his first start of the year earlier this week. Pomeranz still on the mend, but they've got to stabilize the lower half of that rotation. The more starts that they're able to make, the better off the Red Sox will be, not having to shuttle spot starters back and forth to and from Pawtucket. The winner out east, I have to go with the Yankees. It boils down to them having more room for error. They've got the deeper roster, I think, with the best bullpen I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure of that. The Yankees, I mean, the arms that they're bringing out of the pen are just unbelievable, really. A lot of things would have to go wrong for this team not to reach 95 wins. Then again, the Sox are off to a torrid start. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they won, but for my money, I'd have to put it on the Yankees. Top to bottom, we got New York, Boston in a close second, Toronto, Baltimore, and then Tampa Bay. I hate to make it sound like there are only two teams in this division, but I just don't see how the Blue Jays, Orioles, or Rays can become a major factor in this race. They're not bad teams necessarily. They're just stuck playing two great teams repeatedly. To the AL Central, where the fun part is going to be the Twins improving. They were the AL surprise team last year, capitalizing on a mediocre league and sneaking their way into the final wild card spot. Believe it or not, they had the second most runs scored in both August and September, and their big guy Miguel Sano was out most of that time to boot. Now, the front office made multiple moves to shore up the pitching. I'll get into this more in detail in just a minute because the new sheriff in town is the trio of Lance Lynn, Addison Reed, and Fernando Rodney. For now, I'll just say that these were big moves, even if they aren't what you'd call big names. The best thing the Twinkies have going for them is the sheer natural improvement you can expect to see from the bulk of their roster. They are on the rise. Piece 2, the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers are going to be an utter non-factor this season and next season and probably the season after next. It was fun while it lasted, but it's all over now, and it's going to take some getting used to. I'm sure I'll be all right, though. So the new sheriff in town, Lance Lynn, Addison Reed, Fernando Rodney, on their own, none of these three would really deserve to be called the new sheriff in town, but the three of them form quite an upgrade, especially Reed. He's a fireman. Not literally, but in the relief pitcher sense of the word. You can bring him in to get your starter out of the fifth, you can use him to set up the save for someone else, or you can just trot him out there and let him close the damn thing himself. He's bounced around a bit, now pitching for his fifth team in 8 seasons, but when you get traded as a reliever, that's a compliment. I'm sure the Twins are thankful to have landed a guy who could have signed just about anywhere he wanted. Lance Lynn is a solid number 3 to slot behind Jose Berrios and Irvin Santana when he gets back. Lynn is reliable, a quality the Twins desperately need in their starting pitchers. He rebounded quite nicely last year after sitting out all of 2016 following Tommy John surgery. Lynn very rarely misses a scheduled start. He's made at least 29 of them in each of his last 5 seasons. That consistency is going to be invaluable for his new team. And Fernando Rodney, well, he's just the man. He's entertaining, and he's still pretty good at what he does. He is the active saves leader for a reason. He is 1 out of 28 closers in history to reach the 300 mark. And while his best days are behind him at age 41, that changeup is still diving away from hitters' bats and giving them fits. Now, these are important acquisitions for a team that struggled to find reliable pitching throughout 2017. And the icing on the cake is the fact that they got them all at discounted rates because of the inactivity on this year's hot stove. The wild card in the Central is going to be how quickly the young Sox progress. Yoan Moncada and Lucas Giolito are already here leading the charge. Eloy Jimenez and Michael Kopech are soon to follow, and there are many more lurking in the lower minor leagues. Are they ready to contribute at a major league level? I don't know, but if they are, this Chicago team becomes a potential monkey wrench in the Twins' path to another wild card spot. The winner, it's got to be the Indians, right? I think the Twins will keep this close for much longer than most people are predicting. Still, there's no denying that the Indians are the class of this division. They'll play the White Sox, Royals, and Tigers 19 times each this summer. That is 57 total, and I'd be willing to bet that they win no fewer than 40 of those 57 games. Top to bottom, we go Cleveland, Minnesota, Chicago, Kansas City, Detroit. The Indians, like the Yankees, shouldn't have much trouble reaching 95 wins. That being said, I'm buying into the Twins and White Sox much more than most people are. The Royals and Tigers, they're starting down a long road back to being taken seriously. The fun part of the AL West is simply watching the Houston Astros play baseball. They're just so damn good. They can win any and all kind of games. No matter how you want to play, the Astros do that better than you do. They hammer the ball up and down the lineup. They've got starters to match anyone else's. Their defense is not only top-notch when they have all the starters in, they're so versatile they never really have anyone playing out of position. The bullpen is the only slight weakness, but that's nitpicking. And I would imagine GM Jeff Luhnow will be making a move or two before the deadline to address that. We have to say peace to Carlos Beltran. Unfortunately, the future Hall of Famer, best switch hitter of his generation, one of the best postseason hitters of all time. And thanks to the Astros' run last fall, finally we can call Beltran a World Series champion. He was special because he kept on doing it. Even when he had to change his game from speedster and table setter to middle-of-the-order power type, Beltran kept finding ways to remain a good player, a great player. There are 5 guys in the history of baseball who hit 400 homers and stole 300 bases. Those would be Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, Willie Mays, Andre Dawson, and Carlos Beltran. He should be in Cooperstown in no more than 7 years. I've given him a couple of years to be on the ballot where, these writers, they don't like to vote guys in on the first ballot for whatever reason. So give him a couple of years on the ballot. I think 7 years, there's no doubt Beltran will be in Cooperstown. The new sheriff in town, Justin Verlander. Remember, he's entering his first full season as a Houston Astro now. There was some doubt surrounding Verlander's status as an ace until he got traded to Houston and proved he most certainly is still one of the best starting pitchers going right now. In the 5 starts he made for the Astros in September, Verlander went 5-0 with a 1.06 ERA, a whip of 0.65, and 43 strikeouts in 34 innings. In 5 starts and a relief appearance during the postseason, he went 4-1 with a 2.21 ERA, a whip of 0.82, and 38 strikeouts in 36 2/3 innings. Through 3 starts so far this year, he's 2-0 with a 1.45 ERA, a whip of 0.96, and 23 strikeouts in 18 2/3. Excuse me a moment while I collect myself. Those numbers are unbelievable. So good luck to the rest of the West having to face him for a full season. The wild card, I think, is going to be everyone not named the Houston Astros, because after the clear winner, I'm not sure what's going to happen out there. The Rangers still have a lot of great hitters in a great hitter's ballpark. I'll always like the Mariners with Cano and Cruz back-to-back in the middle of that order and King Felix on the mound. The Angels have completely retooled in an effort to chase a wild card spot, and I'm telling you, the A's will not finish in last place this year. And if they do, they won't deserve it. The winner, though, it's got to be the Astros, duh. Last year, they took the lead for good on April 13. The lead, that's nuts. Think about that. By this time last year, they were in first place for good. The lead was up to 10 games on May 28, and it never got that close again. They clinched with 2 weeks to go in the season. And when it was all over, they were standing 21 games better than the second-place Angels. The scariest part is they're going to be even better this year. The rest of the division got better with them, so they may not win as many games as they did last year, but you'll be able to tell if you watch closely. This Houston Astros team is really, it's unbelievable how good they are. Top to bottom, Houston, Los Angeles, Seattle, Oakland, and Texas. The Astros should win this pretty easily. After seeing what Ohtani has done to start the season, I believe he will be a difference maker for the Angels, in addition to a hopefully full healthy season from Mike Trout and Justin Upton, along with all the other guys that the Angels have assembled. The Mariners are going to string their fans along again through another mediocre season as we've grown accustomed to. And man, I am telling you, the Athletics are not going to finish in last place this summer. Book it. I've already watched more A's games than I did all of last year, and I got to tell you, there is loads of talent on that team. It's young, and it's going to make mistakes and go through slumps, but I really think that they'll be able to put together some wins from time to time, and that leaves just the Rangers to occupy last place. Somebody's got to do it. For whatever reason, this group just lacks that secret ingredient. It's a great collection of players, but just like last year, I don't think they'll be able to put it all together. Switching over to the National League now, starting out in the East, the fun part, watching teams in all different phases of the cycle compete against one another. It doesn't have the best teams. It's not going to be the most tightly contested, but I think the NL East might be the most fun division to watch this summer. The Nationals are going to try capitalizing on a relatively weak division so that they can set themselves up for an easier postseason. And Lord knows they need all the help they can get when it comes to October. The Phillies and Braves are in somewhat similar positions in that they're both hoping a lot of their guys can prove they belong here. The difference is the Phillies are more of an unknown with a greater upside, I think, while the Braves seem like a team whose ceiling you can see, even if it's not quite as high. The Mets, meanwhile, are loaded with flawed veterans as the front office really gambles on their starting pitching staying healthy for once. So far, so good for them. The vets aren't showing those flaws, and this past weekend, the quintet of Syndergaard, DeGrom, Matz, Harvey, and Wheeler made their first rotation turn together. That is astounding when you think about how many years those guys have been on that roster, and they haven't been able to go 1 through 5 until this past weekend. Now they just need about 30 more, and they'll really be in business. And, of course, we all know what the Marlins are doing. Their rebuild began with a bang, and now they're in a race to the bottom for draft picks' sake. So, how does all this shake out? Well, we have no idea, and that's why it'll be fun to watch. Peace to Dusty Baker, Terry Collins, and Pete McKinnon. 3/5 of the division is under new management, and the new guys are all first-timers, just like in the AL East. So welcome Dave Martinez, Mickey Callaway, and Gabe Kapler. There's an article from SB Nation's Phillies blog in the links that does a great job introducing us to these 3 first-time managers. Check that out if you can get past the poor attempts at humor. It's pretty informative. The new sheriff in town, Carlos Santana. Security blanket would be an appropriate term to describe Santana's role in the Phillies lineup. With so many young players, talented though they may be, they're going to go through some ups and downs, and if too many guys are down at a certain time, you risk your whole offense going into a serious funk. Santana provides considerable protection against that happening, not only with his performance, but also just the pro tips that he'll be passing down to the younger guys. Santana is the king of walks. In 8 full seasons, he's never posted an on-base percentage under .351. League average, roughly .320. His career mark of .365 is sure to rub off on the powerful young bats that litter this roster. Carlos Santana to the Phillies was my favorite signing of the offseason. The wild card is if all those Mets veterans can find some kind of magic and the starting pitchers stay healthy, they'll be a team to watch out for. That's a lot of ifs that have to come to pass for this to happen, but I don't think it's crazy to think that New York can at least contend for a playoff spot. You're seeing it already. For the first time in franchise history, the Mets started the season 9-1. The winner in the East, it's going to be the Nationals quite easily. Put it this way, the Nationals won the East by 20 games over the Marlins last year. The Marlins might legitimately be 20 games worse this year. The Braves and the Phillies are on the rise, and the Mets could make a little noise, but none of those 3 have gotten that much better. It's not like the Nationals are going to be that much worse. In fact, I like them to probably win 100 games this year. Let's go top to bottom with Washington, New York, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Miami. The Nationals have arguably the deepest lineup in baseball to go along with a starting rotation that's anchored by 2 aces and a bullpen that can finally hold its own. What the Mets have done so far is impressive, but I don't think sustainable. Games between the Phillies and Braves are going to feature an astronomical amount of raw talent. This is going to be their season to marinate all that. And then there are the fish. Lewis Brinson plays a thrilling center field. Starlin Castro is a pro and a guy you should feel obligated to pull for because of his bad luck. Justin Bour still has scary power. Other than those three, not much reason to watch the fish. Moving into the Central, the fun part, the Brewers. They're going for it. I'm really looking forward to watching their season unfold, and I can't help but root for them to succeed. They far exceeded expectations last summer, and they doubled down in the offseason by signing former Brewer Lorenzo Cain and trading for Christian Yelich. They've now got enough guys to have two separate outfield trios that would both be pretty good. The front office did its job. Now it's time for manager Craig Counsell to figure out when and where to play all these moving parts. Yelich is already on the shelf with an oblique issue that might actually be a good thing here in the early going as Counsell looks to get everybody off and running. We have to say peace to Andrew McCutchen. McCutchen was the unquestioned face of the franchise during his tenure in Pittsburgh. There's going to be an adjustment period as the Pirates learn what life is like without their beloved superstar. But with Starling Marte and Gregory Polanco still around, they've got a couple of physical replacements already lined up. The tricky part is finding the spiritual leader, for lack of a better term. The good news is the Pirates are off to a hot start, which certainly helps them ease their way into the post-McCutchen era. The new sheriff in town, Yu Darvish. One thing I know, if Darvish makes 30 starts, he will strike out 200 batters. Pitching for the Cubs, making 30 starts should give him a pretty good shot at surpassing his career high of 16 wins, which he set back in his rookie season. John Lester is a tremendous pitcher, but I'm not sure he's a guy that other teams fear when he's on the mound. Darvish gives the Cubs a starter who makes opponents not want to go to the park that day. Wild card, Brewers versus Cardinals. There's not much separating these two in my mind, and I think whichever team can beat the other more often will end up giving themselves the edge they need to move up into second place in the Central and probably a wild card spot in the National League. Through 6 games so far, it's a wash. The Cards took 2 in Milwaukee last week. The Crew won 2 in St. Louis this week. They won't get together again until Memorial Day, so they've got about a month and a half to try to put some distance between themselves and the other. But there's no doubt this is going to be the most important head-to-head matchup in all of baseball this year. The winner, Cubs. After a quote-unquote down year in which they still managed to reach the NLCS, this team is back to looking like the most talented group in baseball. Joe Maddon, for my money, remains the most impactful manager in the game today. He's got the tough task of sorting out playing time on a roster that is chock full of players who could start anywhere around the leagues. So let's go top to bottom. Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. The Cubs are off to another so-so start. Still, I think it'd be foolish to bet against them outlasting the rest of this strong, albeit overmatched division. The Brewers have an exciting thing going, but it's only exciting so long as they keep winning and making it look like a good idea that they've thrown caution to the wind just a little bit ahead of schedule. The Cardinals, without having made the same splashy moves, they're in a very similar situation. They're leaning on some younger starters that need to do some heavy lifting. There are still some questions about the heart of that lineup, but the Cardinals at least seem to believe that all those things will work themselves out. The Pirates have started hotter than anyone would have predicted. I'd be surprised if they were able to keep it up. And the Reds, they just don't have the quality pitching they need in order to contend in their hitter-friendly ballpark. Finally, we head back out west to wrap things up. Fun part, this is the most competitive division in baseball. 1 through 5, none of the other divisions can match the NL West. It's got the defending league champ, both of last year's wild cards, a team that's undoubtedly on the rise, and a team that just sold its soul to make massive upgrades in an effort to correct an offensive deficiency. I think in this case, we have indeed saved the best for last. And I don't think there's any room for a debate. If you can stay up late enough this summer to take in some NL West contests, 9 times out of 10, you won't be disappointed. And listening to baseball play-by-play is also a fantastic way to drift off to sleep in case you just can't keep yourself up late enough to actually watch. Now, peace to J.D. Martinez. This guy set the league on fire during his final 2 months of 2017, essentially carrying the Diamondbacks to the postseason. He swatted 29 big flies in 232 at-bats. That is 1 homer every 8 at-bats. For context, Barry Bonds, during his record-breaking 73 homer season in 2001, hit one out just a fraction above every 6.5 at-bats. It was, of course, only August and September in Arizona, where the ball flies out almost the way it does in Colorado. At least it used to. The plan is to dial back that extreme hitter friendliness by storing the baseballs in a humidor before they're used in games. Now we're going to have to wait a couple of years to see exactly how well this is working, but the hypothesis is that this humidor will keep the ball in the yard more often. Back to Martinez, I don't care if it was only a couple months in a situation that maximized his power. He proved himself to be a game breaker during that stretch. All offseason, it was assumed that Martinez was going to sign with Boston. There was a time, though, when Arizona had worked itself back into the picture, possibly. Had he returned to this team, I might have honestly picked them over the Dodgers in this division. I would have at least had to think about it for a very long time. That's how good Martinez is. That's how good the Diamondbacks are. They went 7-2 in their final 3 series against the Dodgers after acquiring Martinez last year. That included 2 clean sweeps, one at home in the last of August and then at Dodger Stadium the next week. Obviously, the division series didn't go the way they'd hoped, but they'd had success previous to that. New sheriff in town, Eric Hosmer, much like Carlos Santana does for the Phillies, Eric Hosmer is going to open up the Padres' offense. He's already come in handy with Will Myers having to sit out the past week and a half, and I really think that he's going to make a big difference for that team. Wild card, the San Francisco Giants. I don't know what to expect from this team. They are the definition of a wild card. They might win 90 games and lock down a playoff spot. They might lose 90 games and be the laughing stock of baseball again. A lot of it depends on injuries. They're not off to a great start with Bumgarner and Samardzija on the shelf, and if they can't get those guys back quickly, I don't know, man. It's going to be tough. The Giants made a couple of big-time acquisitions in the trade market, namely Andrew McCutchen and Evan Longoria. The issue is those moves are Band-Aid fixes to deep wounds that I think require some stitches. If this season doesn't go well, the Giants have set themselves back a few years. The winner, Dodgers, again. They have flaws and some holes that need plugging, but they've shown an ability to figure everything out throughout the course of a season. And barring more major injuries to key players, they're, of course, already without Justin Turner for some time, I think they have the juice to take the West. The perfect example of a little bit of everything, but not a lot of anything. Top to bottom, Los Angeles, Arizona, Colorado, San Francisco, San Diego. The Dodgers are still the best in the West, but it's getting closer. Last year, the Diamondbacks and Rockies took giant steps forward, quite unexpectedly, no pun intended. I expect them both to be able to build on that, but I don't think they'll be able to dethrone the Dodgers, who are going for 6 consecutive division titles. The Giants should be much improved. Then again, it would be hard for them not to be. And while the Padres remain the runt of the litter, there's still plenty of reason to be excited for what's in their near future. On the whole, I'm really looking forward to following these 5 teams as they battle it out this summer. All right, baseball fans, I'm going to sign off quickly here because I don't think it's fair that I take up more than a half hour of your day, even if I did just give you everything you need to know to start properly watching baseball this season. So, This has been Ducks on the Pod, episode 27. I'm your host, Mitch Gatzke. Thanks, as always, for listening. And until next time, remember, keep your glove on the dirt, your bat off your shoulder, and always keep your eye on the ball.
See you later. Adios!
See ya!
Goodbye! Be gone! Back, gone.